The moon was full and the spirits were talking. Christina, Kat, Katie, and Jen experienced the paranormal side of the Doty family homestead this weekend. And Christina, Kat, and Jen are here to talk about their adventure on tonight's episode of the Hometown Haunts podcast. So, would you be interested in talking to us tonight? Great. Could chat about a lot of stuff. If you have any questions that pop into your head, feel free to ask them.
Sorry, did I miss? Is it a boy? Is it a girl? Is it a
Oh,
man?
it's the master of the house.
The master of the house.
And his lady. And they're chatty. And they're interested in everyone here. Let's see. I'm just gonna relax these for a second. So, alrighty. Can you point out to where in the room you are standing? I believe you're next to Christina, yes? Yeah. I got goosebumps again. And the ma'am, where are you? You're next to Katie? Yes. Thank you. Yes, Katie, you have the lady of the house next to you. They say welcome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Hometown Haunts podcast, brought to you by the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities Comic Books Anthology. I am your host, Kat Cloco, and along with me in the shadows are Jen Kohler and Christina Wald. At the top, I want to remind you that you can find us on social media and wherever official podcasts can be found. So you can follow us at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram. And of course, if you have your own hometown haunt that you would love to share with us, you can email those to hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. We're an official podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and SoundCloud. Thank you, Jen. Find us on iTunes at Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities. Please rate and review the podcast so other spooky history lovers like yourselves can find it and listen to the joy that is my goofy voice on air. So, little announcement, very short one. Let's see. It is late July, but we're recording this right now. Next month, August 14th, 2021, is Free Comic Book Day. If you're not familiar with Free Comic Book Day, check out, I think it's freecomicbookday.com. You can find local stores in your area that are giving away free comic books. Well, since it's Free Comic Book Day, I'm a comic book illustrator, and Christina and I co-own a comic book publishing company. I'm giving away a very small comic book. So I will be giving away Miss Gray Back from the Dead. Miss Gray is a series that I worked on originally in 2006. I am bringing back the story, thus Back from the Dead. And it's a fun. It's a supernatural dark fantasy series about a grim reaper that reaps the souls of monsters on Earth. So take fun however you want to interpret as fun. I like these particular stories. It's a dark fantasy. Definitely PG-13. So if you are interested, you can download a copy when it comes available on Free Comic Book Day, August 14th, 2021. Wow, I hope you like my voice because you're going to hear it a lot tonight. So this weekend, actually, I guess, Jen and Christina, why don't you pop on just for a break for our listeners so they don't just have to hear me soapbox for like 20 minutes. That's awkward. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hi.
So this weekend, we went on an adventure with our friend Katie and our friends at Spiritual Realm Paranormal to the Doty Homestead.
Yes.
How did we learn
exciting.
about this? Like,
I believe it was on Facebook.
Yeah.
I saw an ad for it, and now that we're temporarily able to go places before we all have to go on lockdown again, we thought this would be something fun to do.
Well, we had an entire homestead to roam around, so we could very easily be outside in a cemetery.
Yes,
and be safely
exactly.
distanced. I mean, in the house, we all wore masks, but that also was a lot of room in that particular house. So Before we get into our experiences, though, what piqued your interest in joining the ghost hunt?
Well,
I like creepy stuff.
we've never done one before. You've done many of them, obviously.
I've
and
done a lot.
experienced a lot of them, and so we've never been in one before. So this seemed like a perfect opportunity to, and we're friends with that group, and so it seemed like a perfect opportunity.
It was a well-oiled tour.
Yep.
Props to them, to Ashley and her crew, because it was really well guided. They knew how to manage the crowds really well.
Mhm.
No one showed up drunk, not the team. I didn't expect that from the team, but I've been the tour guide before, and we've had people come up drunk and loud, and it ruins the atmosphere for everyone. So
Yeah,
I
everybody
was-
seemed really into it, which was nice. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been as we mentioned in our last episode when we said we were going to do this. I've been on ghost tours before where people were not taking it seriously at all, and some ghost tours are quite expensive too, and all those people who spent their money want to have a good experience, and
yeah.
I thought that this was a really good one.
Yeah. So it's a common, they do these pretty frequently, or they did, at least. I was looking at the Journal newspaper, which is the Butler County newspaper, and they announced it a lot. So I'm sure there'll be another tour in the future. I don't know when, maybe next year, but Ashley looks like she'll be pretty busy later this year. So, but I know they are planning a few other tours tentatively later this year around Halloween. And I think there was another one in September that they're planning. So if you're interested, listeners, in joining the Spiritual Realm Paranormal in one of their ghost hunts, which I would say encourage, you can check out their Facebook group. And that, I think it's just Spiritual Realm Paranormal on Facebook, and they'll have all that information up there. So on to the Doty family homestead history.
Yes, this sounds really interesting. I mean, we're kind of doing it in memento style, where we go to the homestead and you hear all the ghosts, and then you learn all the other stuff afterwards.
Yeah, well, I like doing that. We kind of went in as controls.
Mhm.
Like, at least I did. You guys listened to the history, but when the Oxford Historical Society member was talking about the history, I excused myself to the very rustic loo that they have on the premises, which is where apparently the privy has been for at least 130 years.
Whoa.
That's how long that trash pit is.
Okay, I'm glad I didn't use it.
Talk
I'm
about
sure-
a haunted bathroom.
Ew.
Oh no.
Do you have
I
any
have
visitors in there?
No, actually,
Okay,
I
good.
did use the gentleman's bathroom, because everyone, when I said, "Hey, I need to use the restroom," they're like, "Use the men's restroom." I'm like, "Okay."
Oh.
I'm like, "Sure, I'm going to listen," since I've had 5 people say this at the same time while looking really emphatic at me. So I didn't even touch the ladies' restroom. I'm like, I don't want to know what's in there if you're telling me to avoid it. So it was fine. But fun side story for our listeners, the type of restroom this was a camping restroom, which is basically it's a trash pit, being a big pit in the ground, and there's a toilet put on the top of that pit, and you just do your business. But you are in a very rustic bathroom stall, and they have hand sanitizer and stuff. And these are the same kind of outhouses that we had a Girl Scout camp, and I found a raccoon in one time when I went to
No.
use the facilities.
No.
So
No.
that did not happen this time.
I suspect this is where being able to use a squat toilet is useful.
No, because you can step into a squat toilet, as I have done.
Ew.
At least it was clean water in that case. But
Okay,
Yes,
so
don't
I
step
like
in.
to go camping with running water. That's my only
Mhm.
caveat. It doesn't
You
have
like to
to
go
be
glamping.
indoors.
okay.
Well, no, not even that. I mean, I will use an outdoor with no water. It just takes me a minute to adjust.
Okay. So we will always put you in a cabin.
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, On to
A
that.
villa is more,
Villas are
Yeah, I
very
mean, air
nice.
conditioning,
yeah,
a TV maybe.
yeah. Some yurts.
Okay,
are
now
very
you are getting into glamping territory.
I'm kidding. I'm really, I can adjust. It may take me a minute. That's all.
but glamping is way more fun.
Oh yeah.
Glamping is
But
way
you'd
more
have to,
fun.
you have to bring it all with you and then take it all away. That's not fun either.
But anyway, we digress. Back to the Doty.
Yeah, back to the Doty. And all right.
So we're gonna let you
you just
do your thing, and we'll talk about it when you're.
yeah,
because
just
you had
fade
some
back
really-
into the shadows.
Yes, you had some really interesting experiences, and we'll have to talk about that after you go through the history.
Yeah, I'm very interested in your impressions of a ghost hunt too. Even though I know, Jen, you've done one before, but I'm curious, Christina, what you thought. But on to the Doty family history right now. So, sources for tonight's show are from the Oxford Museum Association, who actually spoke before the presentation on Saturday night in front of everyone. The Visitor Bureau of Houston Woods region, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Ohio History Connection, and the Journal News, which is the local newspaper. So, dear listeners, I hope you can't hear the chainsaw that's going on behind my house. Okay, good. It just adds to the horror movie bit. Anyway, before there were any white settlers who moved to the area, the area was a camp for the local Native American tribes and population. Originally, the Shawnee and the Miami lived in the area, but after the French-Indian War, or otherwise known as the 7 Years' War from 1754 to 1763, and all the subsequent wars and skirmishes between the British and the Americans, these tribes were pushed out of the area into northern Ohio or out west. And I think we will be doing a deep dive on the Native American peoples of the Cincinnati region in a later episode because it's very interesting. But our story begins with William Pack of Hamilton, Ohio on May 23rd, 1810, when he purchased the tract of land now known as the Doty family homestead. Pack purchased the land from the trustees of Miami University when they had tracts of land go up for auction. In 1814, Pack sells the land to Gabriel Hutchins, who in 1832, after doing absolutely nothing with this property, sells it to Joseph Morris. And at the time, there were no structures at all on this property. Joseph Morris plays a big part in the history of the Doty Homestead because he's the one that lived in the cave, which we all visited. It was the first place we went to on our part of the tour. We visited what was known by locals as the cave, but really what it was a root cellar, mostly actually a bunker, a la Fort Mifflin, if you've seen them. It was a bunker built underground, and he and his family of 5 at the time lived there for 5 years as they built by hand the Doty family house, which is a brick building that still stands after, oh goodness, almost 130 years. Local legend states that, sorry, I just read that. Anyway. As I said, the farmhouse was built by hand. Each brick was fired on site. This painstaking work took 5 years to complete. They even dug out a well, a brick privy, which stood at the same place as the current privies, and which were located north of the house. There was even a smokehouse and a woodshed along the path to the large barn, but those are now gone. In 1837, the Depression, also known as the Panic of 1837, struck the nation, of course, taking Ohio with it. And it kind of diminished what the Morris family did for a living. So what Joseph Morris did was he distilled liquor, sold it in Cincinnati, would buy all the groceries plus some for his family down in Cincinnati, come back up to Oxford, and then sell them kind of like as a small dry goods store and grocery store for the small community here, or the community up in Oxford. So that's how he made his money. But when there was a depression, people suddenly weren't buying the stuff that he was making anymore, and they weren't able to pay back the debts that they had accumulated for being able to get the property. So after a few years, about 5, in 1842, the property was moved to the two debtors that Joseph Morris had, which would be James Ratcliffe and Wales Bonney of Oxford, Ohio. And Bonney and Ratcliffe then sold the estate in 1844 to Samuel and Sarah Doty. Now, where this is interesting is Sarah Doty is actually Sarah Morris Doty, the sister of Joseph Morris, who actually built the property. So basically, Joseph's sister and brother-in-law swooped in and purchased the entire property and built this large homes, or continued building this large homestead. And all of these people had 5 to 7 children each. So there were a lot of people in this little area. 1844 also saw a 1 acre piece of land given by Job Smith to the First Congregation of Christian Disciples, aka the Campbellites, for church and burial purposes. Here, a 24 by 36 foot meeting house was constructed, but the inside was never completed. Now a stone sits in the center of where the old meeting house was located. And also the cemetery was home to the Doty, Morris, Smith, and post-1850, the Moore families. They were also followers of the Campbellite faith, which followed the teachings of Thomas and his son Alexander Campbell. A little bit about the faith. Originally, it was the Campbells were Presbyterian, but they argued that the strict religious practices of the church led to more division between the denominations. Instead, all denominations should give up their strict practices and join in and become one united church under the Christian faith. They also believed that Christians, regardless of denomination, should be allowed to participate in the Lord's Supper. The Campbells founded their own church in 1809 and later made an alliance with a similar group led by Barton W. Stone of Kentucky and became the Disciples of Christ in 1832. So this is the formal church that the Doty family and the Morris, Smith, and Moore families all followed. However, in this particular case, in 1905, the Doty Settlement Church was dissolved and the cemetery was abandoned by the mid-20th century. So also the Campbellites, the Christian church, sorry, I forgot. Later, oh wow, I can't get, how do I do this? Sorry, I'm thinking of how to transition. So basically, the Campbellites were part of what's known as the New Enlightenment that happened in the Midwest in the mid-1800s, where you had a whole bunch of small divisions between different churches. And in this particular instance, the Disciples of Christ later would be known as just the Christian Church with 2 capital C's, and they established 90 churches throughout the state of Ohio and established Hiram College located outside of Cleveland. So they are still an established church to this day, but their numbers just aren't as big. As for the Doty Settlement Church, it eventually, as more Baptist and Presbyterian families started moving in, it got dissolved. And like I said, in 1905, it was formally dissolved. The area around the farm was known as the Doty community. It had a school, a cemetery, the meeting house. There was also a blacksmith shop, a sawmill, a distillery, a furniture shop, and a fulling mill for textiles. Because what they did was they cleansed, shrank, and thickened cloth at this community. That was one of their big trades. In 1859, I believe it was Morris Doty. Sometimes it is listed as a different member of the family inherits the farm from his father. Morris was the first son of Samuel and Sarah, so that's why I think it was him. But they also state it was Jesse Doty, and I don't know how that could happen unless it went from nephew to uncle, because that was the only other Jesse at the time. So I was a little confused by the family tree. But in 1859, the property stays within the Doty family and continues to stay in the Doty family. 1890, Mary Doty, who's the second wife of Samuel, transfers the house and lands to Carlton Paris, who I think married into the Doty family. 1912, Paris sells it to George Van Asdel, who is also a descendant of the Doty family. And in 1950, the state of Ohio purchased the land from Van Asdel to incorporate it with the Houston State Park and Golf Course. And then, unfortunately, July 11th, 1980, a fire destroyed the original barn along with all the artifacts inside it. A similar 1840s barn is brought from the Sycamore State Park just outside of Dayton, and the farm equipment on display has been donated by surrounding county families. So if you go there now, that is not the original barn. The Pioneer Barn is from just outside of Dayton, and all the equipment that you see within it has been donated by local families or probably like maybe bought at auction. I don't know how they got all their artifacts. There is an artifact room actually on the second floor of the Doty Homestead house. We got a peek inside it, but yeah, it's pretty self-contained, very well maintained too. So I do want to report on some of the reported hauntings. And the fun thing, I mentioned this before the show, was that the Doty Homestead is one of those places that is always rumored to be haunted, but no specific hauntings have ever been mentioned. It's literally, it's old, so therefore it's haunted, is basically the moniker. I know when we went to the cemetery, a lot of the members of Spiritual Paranormal or Spiritual Realm Paranormal did mention that the police do patrol the cemetery because one, there's a lot of headstones missing, but two, we're not far away from was it Miami University? So or is it University of Miami? I don't want to make them mad. I don't remember. At any rate, I think it's Miami University. Anyway, so a lot of college students will go there to party. It is owned and maintained by the Oxford Township Council, and trustees. So it is a well-maintained cemetery. There was no tall grass to be found. It was pristine. I was very proud of them. They do a very good job. So I will start with the Dodie House and the things that people have reported happening to them there. Hair gets played with. That is something that gets reported. On the second floor, the children's rocking horse will start rocking on its own. Visitors have been touched, generally around the shoulders or their head. And a female ghost stays in the second floor bedroom, while a male ghost has been seen in the upstairs hall, but won't come into the bedroom even when invited to. There's a child ghost named Sarah who likes to play with dolls on the second floor bedroom. She also has been reportedly referring to the dolls as Sarah's doll. And a teen boy ghost has been heard in the house stating that he likes music. Moving to the cemetery doesn't really have any hauntings associated with it. It's just spooky, especially in the middle of the cornfield like it is. But the Pioneer Barn is said to host the spirit of Ed on the second floor, who makes lots of knocks and bumps. He reportedly fell to his death in the barn and just came along with the building when it was moved. Also, another spirit has been recorded in the barn, and it spoke Spanish, which a lot of people are like, well, what's the origin? What's the story here? And that's all. Those are the reported hauntings of the actual Doty House and Homestead. It's fantastic. I do suggest you go visit, and it's open on weekends. So with that, Christina and Jen, come back from the shadows.
Okay, I just want to say I really liked that this particular ghost hunt, like the ghosts or the spirits were happy. There was like no bad thing that really you could pinpoint. Not like at Mansfield Reformatory where everybody was jailed and Lord only knows what happened behind those cell doors.
Well, at least they were in the cemetery and in the house. I mean, the barn seemed a bit more fraught.
Yeah. A little bit, because
I
Yeah,
mean, I guess
we
he
can get
wasn't-
into the barn in a little bit, but yeah, you're right. This was a very gentle introduction into the world of ghost hunting and paranormal investigation.
Yeah, it's not like we
Yeah.
started in Saddamsville.
No,
I'm never going
no,
there.
I
Never
would
going
never
there.
take you there.
Please
I
don't
love
ever.
you too much to do that.
I mean, that seemed
Um,
like a bad place.
It was
Mm-mm.
like this place was the family was very content. Let me just say that. They were very content and very welcoming. And now I will note that going into this personally, I had not read anything about this homestead. I went into it completely blind. I almost drove past it when getting there. If there weren't those balloons, and I just go, I'm going to assume this is where it is because this is what my GPS says, but and I'm not like barging into somebody's birthday party, but which was for a moment I was worried, but yeah, very happy. Everyone is generally happy there. The Doty family's very nice. The Morris family's very nice. So we kind of ran into them, but Christina, what did you think about the paranormal investigation? Because that's basically what we do. All those gadgets that we used are
I
things we
especially
use.
like that Connect thing. That was super cool. I had not seen that before. I mean, I've heard that it's actually used for a bunch of different things besides
Yeah.
just paranormal stuff because of its ability to capture stuff. And it was pretty neat.
Yeah.
You know, I thought the mag lights were interesting. I mean, I thought that there was a lot of stuff that seemed to work really well. I think that people that went to see it definitely felt like they probably got their money's worth because it wasn't, you know, something like that could certainly be very hokey.
Yeah. It can. It can go
and I
to.
thought there was a lot of sincerity.
Yeah. Well, it helped that our group was very open too.
Mhm.
Like, I know some people said that they were skeptics, which is just fine. No one claimed to be a cynic, which is an outright, I don't believe anything you're doing is
Mhm.
good anyway. No one was pouting. No one human anyway was or alive was pouting. But yeah, the thing. So for those who are just listening in, we used a variety of different visual methods for communicating with the dead, and they're very common. We use a mag light, which is a mag light flashlight with an incandescent bulb. You've probably seen this done on any paranormal TV show in the past 10 years. And what you do is you loosen the mag light's head enough that the coil is just barely touching the power source, which makes it flicker. And the belief is that a entity is able to use that by connecting the circuit, and they can turn it on and off to say yes or no. And I've seen it work only a handful of times in the 15, 20 years I've been an investigator. Most of the time it just sits there dark like a sausage sitting on whatever dresser you've put it on.
It
So
did
the fact
not do that.
it
this
did not do
weekend.
that this time, I was very surprised. And we used different flashlights. It wasn't the same one over and over again either, which as an anthropologist, I am constantly trying to make sure that we aren't adding in extra false information. Like I want to use different tools and see if we're getting the same result. We also use dowsing rods, really
those were
old
neat.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were nice dowsing rods too. Like
Mhm.
I was envious of their dowsing rod game. So I was like, wow, they put in the money for the good stuff. I usually use a stick. So those were interesting. They're very visual. So we have a lot of photos and video of me or other members using them. And the Doty family seemed to really get how they worked. It may be because the paranormal team had been there before, or as I can, from asking questions, deduce that they knew how to use talking boards and other methods of spirit communication, because those were all very popular. Like water witching was the original use of dowsing rods. But if they were as I'm going to say liberal with their spiritual beliefs as it makes it sound like they were, having a talking board or other methods of spirit communication would have been very common at the time all of them were alive, because especially the later, all the young kids that were born there would have been contemporaries of the Fox sisters. So spiritualism would have been going through the communities at the time too.
Mhm.
So not unheard of for them. Yeah, what else did we use? We used an EM pump was used in the house, which could be why they were so chatty. An EM pump literally pumps electromagnetic fields into the atmosphere. And if you have a quiet ghost that needs help, that helps. The EM pump was located near the front door. We were in the bedroom and then also the kitchen area, which not necessarily close, but
They
got
said the
about 10
bedroom was
feet.
a pretty hot area, though.
The bedroom
Mhm.
was a pretty hot area. We can make so many jokes about that, but we won't. But yeah, with that, and then also we used REM pods, which were new. You guys hadn't. I said you guys. You ladies hadn't had seen REM pods before. They were new a few years ago. Basically, for listeners, a REM pod is, it has a electromagnetic sensor on it, and if anything that causes a discharge gets within about a 2-foot radius, it will buzz and light up. And as the discharge can get closer, like let's say your hand next to the antenna that it uses, it will light up brighter and brighter with different colors. So first I think is red, and then it goes to orange, and then yellow, and then maybe green or blue. It depends on whoever made the REM pod. And you can get tiny little REM pods, just one light on them. And my paranormal teams I worked with before would have an entire collection of them and then basically scatter them across, like if you're, let's say we're at Pennhurst and we're doing a hallway, and entities have been known to walk up and down the hallway, we'd scatter REM pods every few feet, and then we could see them walk up and down, and they will cause the REM pods to light up, stuff like that.
Mm.
It's really nice visual stuff, really easy to record on night vision. And we're looking for visual cues because that's easy stuff to bring to clients and say, well, this is what happened with this REM pod, and or this is the audio. I also have I ran an audio recorder the entire night, but I know my audio is going to be compromised because there were so many people that weren't trained and were talking and whispering to one another. So everything, I have to kind of throw out everything because it's all compromised. But I think that was everything we were using.
Mm-hmm.
No
I like
Ouija
that
boards were
somebody had
used.
Somebody had like you might have mentioned already, where you could see the heat light sort of thing that
Mm.
kid
Oh
was
yeah, the
carrying
FLIR
around.
gun.
That was
Yeah,
pretty
the
cool.
Yeah,
That
there was
was
the FLIR.
really
I forgot
cool.
about that. Yeah, there was the FLIR gun, which made popular by ghost hunters about a decade ago, and that's just a heat signature. So you just point it towards something, and it will show the heat. You have to be very careful where you point it. Basically, everywhere you point it has to be a soft or matted coated object, because if you point it at metal or glass, it's just going to shoot back at you and show you your own heat signature. So you have
Oh,
to be very
interesting.
careful. He was showing it right on the bed, and that was going to be soft and not reflective. So the fact that we got a heat signature in that place was really interesting and compelling information.
My favorite thing about that is when I think the kid's name was Max, when he pointed it out and I couldn't find, he let me, and I couldn't find it. And then finally I was like, oh, can I see? And then the flashlight went off as a yes. And it was, I just got the feeling like she was just sitting right in front of me.
Yeah, she was. She was
Yeah.
there the entire time. So we'll start with the Dodie House. So we started, they gave us a small tour of the house, and we got a lot of wonderful interior video of the house for all of you. So if you are listening, I highly suggest watching us on YouTube, because we have video footage and photo footage provided by all three of us. Jen did awesome photography, especially of the cemetery and the full moon that we ghost hunted under.
I know that was incredible.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
did my best to make a video tour and not make it feel like you're on a ship. So But we started in the house, and for the actual ghost hunt proper, we started in the first floor bedroom, which was a hot spot according to the paranormal group, SRP, Spiritual Realm Paranormal. And we did a 40-minute long dowsing rod session between that and the kitchen. And we were talking to who I believe, let me get my notes here. I've thrown my notes out. So I kept referring to them to the master and sorry, I pressed something on my keyboard. Can you still see me?
Yeah, we can see you
Okay.
and hear you.
So I kept saying, well, the master and the mistress of the house. I kept saying that because I wasn't getting names, but I got a distinct, the person who built the house and his wife were the ones that we were talking to. So definitely that would put it as Joseph Morris and his wife, Kezia Smith Morris. Now, the interesting thing with that is Kezia's mother or father was Job Smith, who gave the property for the cemetery and the meeting house. So this is how those two families are related. So Joseph Morris, of course, with my little history lesson, he built the property in 1832, and I'm just double checking. Yes, 1832, and ended up having to give up the property in 1842 to his debtors. And it was definitely those two. Kezia lived to be 78 years old, and I was getting a very matronly vibe from her. And now I get why, because she lived to be a matron. Joseph died about 30 years before her, and they had a lot of kids, but a few, most of them died before Kezia even died. Two of them to be TB, but those were who we were talking to. So definitely Kezia. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. It's Kezia.
I have no idea, but there was a portrait of her in the first room, and it was she had a pretty intense expression.
Everyone was intense with those photos.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, they were still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
she was probably sitting there.
I kind of the photos were so intense. It was kind of reminding me of the painting in Ghostbusters, where it's like they're looking at you.
Yeah, it's just probably because she just didn't want to move.
Yeah, you were. I mean, it took a long time to take.
Yeah, she and Joseph always had a hard time, and were always a little bit hard on money. And she had a hard life, although it was very long, and a very tragic one. But she was a very good host. So she was the one that was in that bedroom who we were talking to. As we were talking to her at a portion of the night, we could see an indent forming on the bed in that room. And that's where, Jen, you saw your heat signature. And so did Max, who was using the FLIR gun. And that was quite remarkable. It was interesting how he could see it where he was standing. But if we just handed you the FLIR gun and you were standing, you could not see it. I was like, that's strange. I don't know how to explain that one. But then, as you said, when you asked permission, suddenly you got the heat signature and the light turning on. So she was a good host.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the REM pods kept going off in the front parlor, and I attributed that to Joseph walking around in there after he greeted all of us in the bedroom. That would be, yeah. And he wasn't as chatty. She was definitely chatty. And then at some point, we got a teenage girl talking to us, not a teenage boy. And there was many generations of Dodys lived in that house. Like, the property stayed in the family from 1844 until 1950. Wow. So that's over 100 years in the same family. So at some point, we were talking to a girl who came forward as a teenage girl, but actually also lived into her 80s. So I don't know how she's related to the family. But
she did tell me that we get reunited with our pets, our deceased pets, when we pass on. So I kind of liked that.
They did give us a lot of insight, because the other members of our group were really curious about just the boundaries that ghosts follow and the rules. And what was kind of funny is, after going through and reading about their faith principles, I'm like, there are no rules. But yeah, basically between this and the cemetery, those we talked to from the other side were saying, yes, we're reunited with pets. Oh, hi, Chewy. Speak of
Speaking
the
of
puppy.
which, yeah. He's like, did someone mention being reunited?
Yeah.
I need
me a
pets,
second.
Mom.
He
Yeah.
says, I want to be reunited now.
Yeah. Hi. All right. Hi, Chewy. Oh, I guess you're going to be on the show now. Hi.
Oh,
Yeah.
Aw,
Yeah.
sweet baby.
Yeah. So that, and also that there were no boundaries, that they could actually move around freely. And which kind of surprised people, because one of the kind of weird dogmas about ghosts that we're taught about in media is that they're bound to a location and that's why they haunt it. Not really the concept of, really, if you've passed on, you can return to the locations that made you happy. So, and like, that particular idea doesn't fly with Gettysburg or Antietam, because why are there so many ghosts there? Are they bound there? Or have they not passed on? It brings up a lot of questions. But
Do you think it has to do with like dying before their time or very tragically?
it could be that like, I think each haunt is special in its own way. So everyone has their own reason for haunting things, and now having family members that have had different personality disorders, you start realizing that not everyone is haunting specifically, like not everyone that's a ghost has a healthy brain, basically. And maybe attached, like hoarders could be attached to items that we saw, like what we saw in the barn. And so there could be unhealthy attachments to items as well. It's not all sunshine and roses, but it is
Yeah.
at that farm for the most part.
Well, I perhaps it's because a lot of ghost stories tend to focus more on people that have had bad experiences than good experiences. Like you might have
Yes.
someone that like had really, like the teenager that you spoke to, that had really good memories.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. The family
So
members, for the most part, seem to have good memories, even though there was a lot of tragedy that did happen. So
which was
Samuel,
common just in general there. People
just in general,
died.
I think people were a little bit more accustomed to the concept of not surviving into your adulthood. You
Mhm.
could die from things. So, and very young. So tragedy still struck young kids. There was a toddler we were absolutely not allowed to talk about. And I found several infants and toddlers that had died just in the main family that we were
Mhm.
looking into. So I could see why Kaziza, oh man, we're
Mhm.
going to get told how to pronounce this
Well,
name.
we could always ask Ashley if they know how to pronounce
Yeah.
it. I mean, surely the
Yeah.
historical person,
Probably
society
does.
person knows how to pronounce
Yeah.
it.
The really nice
Yeah.
hostess of the house.
Yeah, but she did lose. She had 7 kids, and 6 of them did not outlive her. 2 of
Mhm.
them died of tuberculosis. A few of them died younger than that. Only one survived her, and that one also managed to make it into their 30s. So, yeah,
So
kind of a
sad.
tragic, hard life for her, but she was so gracious and sweet. You just
Mhm.
wanted to hug her.
Is the
Yeah.
Doty family completely gone? Are there descendants?
Oh no, there's descendants in that
Okay.
entire community. Is, I don't want to say related to one another, but by now they're probably all distant cousins. But yeah, the Dodys still are a strong part of that community. So maybe somebody can chime from that family that can tell me how to pronounce their poor grandmother's name. So moving to this cemetery, that was fun. Almost lost a foot, but with our
We're
drive,
walking in the dark
yeah, almost lost a foot. We're fine. We get out of the car, and I remember turning to Jen and saying, "There are 10 people standing at the crest of the hill watching us exit the cars, and they
And
were
I said,
all
"Don't tell
wearing
me that."
black." All solemn faces. They were all really pale like me, but all frowning and watching us like leave the car, and they were just all wearing different variations of black outfits. So like the men, it was kind of like if you saw, this sounds weird, a bunch of angry Amish people. That's because
That's the name of the episode.
a bunch of, no, they weren't Amish, but
that's true. They weren't, but-
you're looking at that time frame though. That was the same style of clothes that you're looking at is the prairie clothes from the 1830s through the 1860s. So you're gonna have the black hats. You're gonna have buttons. You're not gonna have zippers. So
Did they not want us there?
oh no, they were just really curious. But
Oh,
just imagine an entire group of people suddenly barging
barging.
in on your family. Like in one case, Kazia and her entire family are buried there, like Joseph Morris and Kazia and all their kids. So it's a big old family reunion. And suddenly there's strangers that are not from your community coming in to talk to you. Now they were very chatty, and we seemed to chat with as I stated when we were with the group, I'm like, I'm talking to a girl, or not a girl, a woman who married into the family and died young. And her husband, who wasn't nearly as chatty as she was, it was the wives this time that were so chatty. And I suspect we were talking to Sarah Morris Doty, who was the first wife of Samuel Doty and the sister of Joseph Morris. She died of cholera because there was a big cholera epidemic. She died at 32 years old in 1847.
Wow.
And she left 3 kids behind,
Aw.
Morris, Isaac, and Jenny. And her headstone is not accounted for. Samuel's is. Now, it wasn't next to where we were at. It was only a few feet away. I mean, it wasn't a huge cemetery, but I believe that's who we were talking to, because I got a feeling that they were connected to the homestead. And the interesting thing was Sarah had lived her entire life on that homestead or around that homestead because Joseph built it. So she would have been visiting. So basically her husband, from this is me looking at history and kind of going, I think this is what happened. I think her husband bought the family homestead for her to save her brother. So even though Joseph and Kazia did not live there. So yeah, that was his first
interesting.
wife. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so that's who I think who we were talking to. And yet again, they were talking like we got into a conversation about different family members who were also around, not necessarily haunting people, but just kind of following them around, kind of like little guardian angels, making sure you're doing okay. Because somebody asked about, and I didn't expect to get into a divination, basically using the dowsing rods of whose family members were with you right at that moment. Kind of like how I did that for you, for Jen, a few months ago. I did not expect to go into one of those because I'm not very good at it. And, but I guess Sarah was willing to help because she was definitely pointing out things to people. And we had a profound experience, what seemed like a profound experience by another group member. And I'm just like, I don't know what's happening. I'm just holding the rods. But
Well,
Well,
it was like
I
a
thought
former partner or something, wasn't it?
yeah, I don't want to go into it too deeply because we don't know the circumstances. And it seemed to
Elicit
be
a
very
response
touching.
for sure. Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm just standing there like I'm just holding a metal rod. I'm glad we're able to communicate. I don't know what I've said. So
Well, apparently my mom's mom was there, my grandma Julie. I didn't really want to go into like too many questions because it felt obvious to me that the other group members needed it more than I did. So I just told her, hi, I love you and miss you, but did she say anything to you, or did you just kind of got the feeling she was there?
Well, she knows that you love and miss her every day. So that is thing. It was cut off really quickly. I'm going to be honest.
Okay. Well, I kind of figured.
There's a Speaking as speaking as a medium here,
Mhm.
the spirit world, once they realize that somebody is able to talk and give messages from the living to the dead and vice versa,
Mhm.
you start getting inundated with people,
Oh,
and
so they can get drowned out.
you can get drowned out. And in this case, it was that was starting to happen. And then at the same time, as people are starting to get like Katie got revealed that somebody was next to her that she wasn't expecting, the living start getting agitated too. And that
Mhm.
can also interrupt things. So we kind of had interruption on both sides. That sounds like a cop out, but we just didn't really keep going down that path because
Yeah.
also we were only allowed to be in there for about 40 minutes and I
Right.
couldn't do personal readings for everyone on a group.
Well, no, and that's why I just said what I did.
Yeah.
And to me, that is really cool to be there with you to
Mhm.
see how it works for you, and just to
Mhm.
see how that kind of spiritual thing just works in general, because you really don't have anything to base that off of except for TV and movies, and we all know how that goes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I know while we were there, different members were asking me how I was talking to them.
Mhm.
And how I was like definitely in the barn. I just pulled out information literally out of thin air and freaked out members of the team. Like, I want to talk to Ashley because we have to have a deeper discussion on what I did, and I I hope I didn't cause waves. That's just me being very anxious, though. So onto that bombshell, we'll just move over to the barn. So this was
Yeah,
the
that was
last place
probably the
that we.
most angsty spot and the
It was
latest. We were
very
there.
angsty. Yeah, we were
And
there.
I was
So
kind of tuned out at that point. I was just standing at a window enjoying the breeze, so I didn't catch everything that was going on there.
It seemed like there was something definitely happening. Ashley was, and I think she would corroborate this. We're not, I mean, they were definitely having issues with someone.
Yeah, they were.
Mhm.
They've visited this location a few times. I think they said this was their fourth investigation or ghost hunt here, and they've come across a gentleman on the second floor. Now, I will say, right before we went upstairs, just for me going to the barn, I could feel the anxiety from the second floor. And if you remember, before she said anything, I said, "There's someone right above me," pointing to the middle of the barn, who is extremely anxious but chatty. And she just looked at me and went, "Yeah." And then she kind of prefaced that they were having a long-standing discussion with a particular person on the other side, and that he wasn't going anywhere, and it wasn't being productive, and we'll see what happens. And we walk into the barn. Now, mind you, the barn, all the doors were open, and these were large doors.
We have
Um,
pictures we can.
yeah, we have pictures. I still wore my mask inside because there's also a lot of hay and there are mice that live in the building. So, and my allergies are terrible. Um, so, and also a thunderstorm was rolling in. So we did get a lot of wind. So that did kind of also mess up a lot of audio. I forget where I'm going with this. Oh, I walked in and immediately felt nauseous, which is a bad indicator for anyone who's a medium because that means that spirit energy is too dang high. And I think Ashley even mentioned that it was making her nauseous, and she did leave, but it wasn't for that reason. And it was probably because the two of us feed off of each other really well, and yeah, I think that was what happened. So we go up to the second floor, and so the first floor is all just hand tools on display. Like you got hand scythes, you got pitchforks, brooms. There's a nice witchy cauldron over there, and other tools. And you go upstairs, and it's all large farm equipment from pre and post industrial age. I think the latest that goes the 1920s is what the website said. And I walk in and immediately am faced with a hay baler. And I look at that thing and go, somebody's attached to that. It's not great. And then I turn around and there's this big 1920s, I think it was a corn harvester. And I look at that. I don't remember who I said this to, but I go, somebody lost a limb with that. as soon as we walked onto the second floor, and Ashley just stayed mum, and I think as Kelsey was her partner on that level, and she also stayed mum. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting a lot of affirmatives on this because whenever I'm right about something, my hair stands on end. So we're walking around, and I run into the spirit of the elderly gentleman first,
The hay baler guy.
the hay baler guy, and he is not Ed of ghost story fame. I don't know who Ed is. We did not run into any Eds, but he's an old guy, sweet, kind of like lonely, basically, but happy to chat. And we chatted with him at the end. But the interesting thing was going back to that corn harvester. And I walked up to that, and they were using the Connect system on there because they had been seeing this spirit on and off all evening, popping on top of the seat and then disappearing, and then popping back and then disappearing. And we were using, they had a REM pod. It wasn't reacting to anything. And they were also using a Maglite flashlight and the dowsing rods. And I wasn't using the dowsing rods this time. Somebody else was. And we were getting answers on both the Maglite and the dowsing rods simultaneously, which was really interesting. We were getting that all night, which is fantastic. What were your thoughts as we were talking about all that stuff?
It seemed like there was a lot of frustration, and it made me think that a lot of times when you're talking to these spirits, that perhaps they're not always being totally honest. Like it's sort of like when you unreliable narrator was
Yes.
what I was thinking about when you read something like Catcher in the Rye or something, and the person that's telling the story is not necessarily being honest with you.
Yeah, and you get used to when you listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, you suddenly realize that people aren't always forthcoming. They're always going to paint themselves as the hero of their own narratives, which was definitely what was happening with this. So, like I said earlier, I came into this blind, and I'm really curious for more information, like not information about the life and everything, but if other mediums, what they say. But of course, putting this out into the world immediately muddies the waters too. So we're working on interesting area. So Ashley left because he was being very stubborn and not really, he was being entertaining, but also really contradictory with his statements. And she was trying to get more information out of him. And we were able to, she asked, "Are you in your 20s?" And of course, the flashlight and the dowsing rod say yes. And she's like, "Are you over the age of 25? And he didn't say anything. But Ashley and I looked at each other and went, "Yeah, dude, you're over the age of 25. We both sense it." And then it reluctantly said yes. And he would only talk to her for a while. So she left just to force him to talk to somebody else if he was going to continue talking, which was a smart move. And he started getting really quiet from my recollection and not really speaking too much, just a lot of yes or no's. And I was just like, okay. And I just spoke, I guess some people would say spoke my truth type of thing, where I was just like, okay, sir, I've run into ghosts like you before who say you want to cross over, but you really are just joshing with everyone just because it makes, if you say you want to cross over from being stuck wherever you're at, which is usually because of grievances or trauma or attachments to items, which happens at Gettysburg and Antietam a lot. There's a lot of soldiers that are stuck there. At any rate, they'll say that they're stuck there if they know the jargon and if they've seen the same people over and over again, and just to kind of have an audience because they're bored and want somebody to talk to. They don't necessarily live in the moment, or how do I say this? They don't live on our timeline. Time can work differently, But at the same time, it gets really boring seeing the same ghosts over and over again in the same vicinity if they're not really leaving, especially if they are attached to an item, which does happen. I don't know what spiritual realm paranormal, what their other investigations have brought up. So this is just what I got. And I just looked at him. And by the way, he was about 5'9" with brown hair and brown eyes, young Caucasian guy. And I look at him, I'm like, sir, you're a 28-year-old male. You're from this area, but not directly from here. And you lost your arm to this piece of farming equipment. And that, which was ironic because the team kept saying, can you wave to us? And I'm like, really? He doesn't have an arm. How is he going to wave the stump? I guess is what he can do. But it was the most, if they knew that that's what had happened, which I think they did, they had a suspicion of, I'm like, that's really kind of mean. I don't think they meant to, because it's just it's just a phrase, but it kind of salt on wound there. But he died of this wound about 2.5 weeks after it happened, of gangrene, and he left behind his family. Whether he was married to his partner or not, I don't know. I said he was unmarried. He was definitely giving off a stag vibe, but he had a son at either rate, whether it was a toddler son, which is what I got. Ashley, I think, just had his partner was pregnant when he died and he never got to meet the child. At either rate, he never really got to see his child. And that's who he was sticking around searching for, was his family member that he never met. And when I just blurted all this out, the team member just looked at me and went, that's it. That's it verbatim. I don't know how you knew that, but that's what it is. And I'm like, he told me. Like, not specifically him, more my spirit guides acting as liaisons, but they basically interpreted everything to me, and I just went, this is what the situation is. The fun thing is, we don't know if this is the truth or not. This could be complete and utter bunk, because I looked for accident reports from that early 1900s through about 1930. Nothing really popped up. It was nothing that matched that particular situation. It may never have been reported. And
is he attached to the piece of machinery though? And
he comes along with the yeah. So the machinery, they said, was from outside of Oxford. I'm not sure, and
Gotcha.
And the team member also wasn't completely certain. But I also had the little tidbit of information of the person who donated the machinery was an acquaintance to the family, his family. So they had the machine, but they weren't necessarily direct family. But that's all I could give him, because after I just blurted all that stuff out in a mad rush of just info dump.
I remember you saying all the stuff.
Yeah, he went pouty. And even Max said he was pouting. And I was just like, well, Max is picking up on this. Yeah, he got mad. And I've run into that quite a number of times. The most notorious was at Bellbrook for an event there, where I just said, sir, I don't know why it's always male ghosts when this happens. I was like, sir, this is your history. I know your history. Can you stop messing around with us and actually talk? And
you took their fun away. How dare you?
I took his fun away, and he stopped communicating, which that wasn't antagonizing per se, but I realized that it came off kind of that way. And I kind of regret how forceful I think in my head I sounded, because it kind of shut down the entire communication. And then we got the other guy from the hay baler was finally able to come forward and be like, hey, I can talk. And we also got knocks and stuff happening. Sound of coins being dropped on the floor happened too, which is a really common experience with ghosts. So
Yeah, I've heard a lot of
I
stories
missed
about
all of
coins.
that.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So when you have like all of these entities occupying that space, are they aware of each other?
they can be. You can
But-
also get layering, but in this case, they were aware of one another
Okay.
because the older man from the hay baler was just calling this kid, and I call him in my head Matthew, but I'm not exactly certain if that's his name or just something that got assigned to him. But he was calling him just kind of vaudeville was what I kept hearing from him. Like his personality should have been on vaudeville, which really dates the old guy. But basically, he thought the young kid talked too much.
He's
And
grandstanding.
yeah, exactly. And that's definitely what he was doing. And
I
I
mean,
didn't
that
mean-
feeling was definitely tense.
it was very tense. And I think that's
mean-
why I went off on him too, because I got fed up with this
Yeah.
attitude he was giving.
Well, I think Ashley was pretty fed up with him too.
Mhm.
She
He
might
does-
listen to this episode and let us know kind of more.
Yeah,
where-
I really love some extra input because this is just my view of things, and that can
Mhm.
always change too. But
Mhm.
Well, I
I
could
did
feel
not-
the tension from where I was standing.
yeah, I
That's-
was just
yeah.
it was just frustration with him, and we run into that. I've been with groups that have gone out to Antietam and Gettysburg, and we get the same. I keep bringing that up because we get similar young men. In this case, even younger, you're looking at 18, 15-year-olds that would come up and be like, I want to cross over. But when you actually are trying to get them to do it, they're just like, no, it's fun here chasing people and freaking them out and stuff like that. So
So it's like immaturity.
there's a lot of immaturity. And also, if this ghost is getting a lot of attention and he gets to grandstand, like you said, Christina, he was craving attention. A very self-centered, dare I say, narcissistic personality this guy had. So I really love the attention. And somebody coming in that he doesn't know, being able to read his entire life history in under 2 minutes and why he died and how he died and all that, that's rather shocking. So
Mhm.
I'm not surprised he shut up after that.
Well, it's just so fascinating. I mean, to be able to be sensitive to that sort of thing. I'm kind of on the fence if I'd like to be sensitive to that sort of thing or not, because it sounds like it could be very stressful.
It can be if you don't know how to block out the dead, basically. And when I was a teenager, that was really hard. That was not a skill I had, and it got overwhelming a lot. So, but
Well, one
that
wonders
was a
if
great
people-
phrase.
If people poo-pooing people that are sensitive like that, if that's a problem of angst, because you talk about difficulties like, and it all gets kind of lumped into a mental illness sort of thing, because you have people that refuse to believe that some people might be sensitive to those sorts of
Yeah.
things. They don't have a lot of resources to help them deal with it.
It could be. From the people I have talked to who are cynics or very staunch skeptics, and cynics, they've been burned by things in the world in their past, and they have every reason to be very suspicious. I mean, honestly, what was I doing? I was talking to a flashlight and a pair of metal rods. I mean, woo, that is really weird.
Well, that's
But
our perception, not yours.
Yeah. Well, I put myself out of my own shoes to kind of reframe myself. So I realized that what I'm doing, talking to dead people, it's normal for me. It's not normal for everyone. And it freaks people out. The fact that there was multiple times where I'd ask a question, my hairs would stand up on my arms because I knew I was right. And then we'd have the flashlight and the rods at the same time crossing to respond, as I'm also saying yes, because that's what the spirit's telling me, is very compelling. Because I'm like, look, guys, I can prove that I'm actually talking to dead people.
Well, I mean, how is it that unbelievable? I mean, we have cell phones and we can talk to anyone in the world instantly, and
Well,
by the
that's some
time we-
mechanics versus organic thing.
Well, no. What I'm saying is that if you were looking at this technology without any context, you'd be like, wow, this is amazing that you can talk to someone, and the signals and the thing that carries it to your phone or whatever, or with radio or anything like that, you can't see any of that stuff. That's all there though. And, you could possibly look at it like this: just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there.
I believe you've just mentioned the tagline of the Santa Claus with Tim Allen.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think
that's
there
the
is-
same point. It's you can have faith in something that's unseen. That's the entire point of every religion.
Well,
And
I think that if you're a super hardcore skeptic, I think a lot of it might be that it's comforting to think that this is all there is, because if you are open to the idea that it's not, and that there's a lot of layers and dimensions, and there's tons of stuff here, that's a very distressing and disturbing thought. As a matter of fact, that is a direct quote from somebody that listens to our show. He said he was listening to our show, and he said, "You guys mentioned other entities." And he said, "That freaked me out. What do you mean other entities? What does that mean?" And he said he had nightmares after that.
I don't mean to give anyone nightmares.
But I think that there's a comfort to the idea of reductionism, and it's not just being skeptical, but anybody that ascribes to a specific, perhaps religious, even and even skepticism to a degree is a religion as well. I mean, anytime you adhere to some super strict dogma, it's very distressing when it turns out that dogma is totally not true. Or if that dogma's,
or maybe it is true, and that could be as equally as disturbing.
I think that the way we experience the world is so weird and so singular to our personal experience. I find it.
We're all unreliable narrators.
Yeah, we don't know what we're. The virtual reality theory could be real. I mean, how do we know we're not in a deep immersion video game or something like that? And so, whatever our weird concept of reality is very unreliable. We have no idea where it's coming from or what it is.
Yeah, and going back to the story with reading the ghost at the corn collector machine, I got the basics of young 20-something died, arm no longer on body, died of gangrene. But other mediums, like, we all kind of read it differently, which is interesting and perfectly fine, because eventually we'll get a consensus of what the story may be. But like I said, until somebody comes with, this was my great uncle Jerry and this is what happened to him, we don't know. It's almost a fairy tale at this point. So
And
but
you had mentioned sometimes they're dishonest about what
they are dishonest because they were human.
Make something up.
Yeah. And that's also when you're trying to interpret the things being said, like, just as a tip, if you are ever working with a medium or somebody using dowsing rods, don't ask contradictory questions one right after another, because this happened in the cemetery a few times. They're starting to cross for yes, and then another question gets asked and then they go to no, and then the person asking the question is like, well, which is it? And I'm like, well, do you want to take a second and think about how you're going to phrase your question and give at least 30 seconds between the two so that something can happen? Like, it's you can't. I get the excitement. I do. I've done the exact same stupid thing, which is why I'm able to, from my mistake, I teach you. Be patient with your questions.
But it's just we have no idea what the context of these responses is, and I think that's the thing that's most interesting. I mean, I think anyone that claims they know everything about something, there's no way they can be right.
Yeah, run for the hills. I'm not claiming I'm right at all. These are just my intuitions.
And that's a sign of intelligence.
I wasn't meaning it by what you were saying. What I was saying was, when people say this is real or this isn't real, you don't really have any sort of context to say what's real or what's not. I mean,
right.
Exactly.
Well, even like, say, eyewitness accounts, like back in the day when they would solve a crime, this person saw this person commit the crime, so therefore they're guilty, right? But as we have grown, we've come to realize that eyewitness accounts are completely different from person to person. So they're really unreliable.
Oh, they're
So-
hugely unreliable.
Right. So how I used to think that, well, if I can see it, well, then of course I know what's happening.
Mhm.
But that
Mhm.
is not the case, just mainly because as I've gotten older and I am driving at night and I see shit that I'm like, what is that? And and it's just my eyes playing tricks on me,
Yeah.
it's, or I'm tired or, and so how can we tell, like you seeing the doppelganger and I didn't
Oh
see
yeah.
it,
Yeah.
I never want to see something like that ever.
Well,
Yeah.
that
So,
might
but
be
I
part of the reason
totally
you don't.
believe, huh?
That might be part of the reason you don't.
Right, which is fine. And I totally believe Kat's version account
Yeah.
of what happened to her.
Yeah, that's I strive to make sure that I sound like a reliable narrator and
Mhm.
do put in a percentage of error. But
Yeah.
that's why like I stated earlier, as a medium and I'm working with the mag lights and everything else, I want things to be able to back up visually what I'm saying, because it makes my statements slightly more plausible. And because I could do full on readings, but you could just go, okay, that was a nice story. Tell me another one. And so,
Well, I do have to tell you, after the one podcast we did where Amanda Ashling, you saw my dad standing, or
mhm.
someone that looked like my dad.
Yeah.
My friend Christine, she came over a couple weeks later and was like, yeah, 10 years ago, I sat over there and your dad told me exactly what to say to you if you ever asked.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, what'd he say? And then she couldn't give me a straight answer, but it was just interesting that it was all happening at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm really kind of curious as to why my grandma's been hanging around, but Christine has also told me in the past that she has seen my grandmother around my family.
Mhm.
So to me, it's a very comforting thought. Like I'm not Catholic, but I was
Mhm.
raised with Catholicism, and I always found the concept of guardian angels really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And when my dad died, I always felt like he was there watching out for me,
Mm-hmm.
and just you guys saying this recently just kind of confirms that belief. Is that confirmation bias? Maybe, but it still brings me comfort. So,
And that's the important thing, is if it brings you
Yeah.
comfort,
Mhm.
generally, spiritually speaking, that's a good thing.
yeah.
And yeah, I could talk about a little bit of my theory about why people hang around and pop in and out when they do. I don't know if anyone's
I
interested
would be
in that.
very interested in that.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just built up. I will caveat this saying I grew up Presbyterian. I
Mhm.
went to many youth groups. I have read the Bible several times, and I am still a spirit medium who talks to dead people routinely. So, and have 20 years of paranormal investigation experience. So, anyhow, so this is where I'm coming from. From my experience talking with people, is both alive and dead, is that when you pass away, you can either continue on to the great beyond, where you just pass over. If you're Christian, you get to go see God in heaven. If you're Buddhist, you have gone and been reincarnated. You have choices. But one of the choices is, once you pass over, is you can come back and visit your family. That's, if that is heaven for you, if seeing your family members brings you joy, even if you're not visually participating in the moment, you can do that. Speaking from experience, my dad has popped in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner a few years after he passed away. My mother-in-law witnessed that too. So in that case, I can go, well, there may have been two crazy redheads at the table, but we saw the same man. My grandmother, when I had my son, popped in and out for the first 2 months and was very
Aw.
calming. And when I would kind of do those new mom panics going, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? My grandma would kind of have this small voice that says, calm down, and kind of guide me through things. And because she was the mom of 4 boys and 4 stepkids.
Whoa.
So yeah, she got a brood of 8. 7 of them were boys. So
That's a
Wow.
lot. That's
a lot of experience right there. And once in a while, when I just don't know what I'm doing, I'm like, Grandma, please help. So, so both my grandmother and my father, and my grandmother is my father's mother, so it's a paternal grandmother, have
Interesting.
popped in from time to time. When I was a young kid and I was living in the haunted house, my maternal grandparents popped in a lot because that house was stuffed to the gills in their property. And they were attached to that property. And also, my mom wouldn't let them go. Like, not just I love my mom, I wish she was around, or I love my dad, I wish he was around. It was an unhealthy attachment, especially
Oh.
to her dad, because she was very much a daddy's girl. They did a lot of things together, and the shock of losing him, even if it was 30 years later, was still raw. And that unhealthy attachment led to other unhealthy things crawling into the house. And that's a subject for a different day. But one of the things I do remember is my grandma Beryl popping in during slumber parties and royally scaring my friends, to the point one of them woke up one time around 3 a.m. to my grandmother hovering over her,
Oh my
watching her
God.
sleep. The entire family, like, it was, I think, my 8th birthday party. Just bloody murder is what she screamed. And her parents had to come pick her up because she refused to sleep in the
Aw.
house again. And that ended slumber parties at my house that we hosted for quite a few years, unless my friends knew that the house was haunted and were comfortable with the crazy family members popping up. As I mentioned on Saturday, music boxes that required to be opened would randomly go off on their own. We'd hear footsteps. There were shadow people. It was really kind of creepy over there.
Oh wow.
But yeah, but so yeah, I've had members of each side of the family. I've had cats. Talking about imprints on a bed. My old cat Gracie, she passed away of cancer back in 2000.
Aw.
And I remember doing homework in my bedroom, and because I was in high school at the time, and my mom started screaming, and I run down the hallway, and there's imprints forming on the bed as Gracie's walking up to my mom for a pet. Gracie
Aw.
had been dead for 2 weeks. And Canuck,
That actually ties in with our hometown haunt this evening.
oh yay. I will just end it there then.
Aw.
Sorry. Every week we feature a hometown haunt submitted by you, the listeners. If you're interested in submitting your own hometown haunt, creepy cryptid story, or urban legends, you can email them to hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. Take it away, Christina.
And as I mentioned, this is kind of a segue from your discussion about the cat coming up for pets. And this is from Steve. And it says, this kitty lived a long life, 19 years. He passed away in my basement studio. One day, like 2 years later, I was at the stove cooking. The basement door stairs were to my left. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his tail, standing straight up like it always did, running towards the door. I turned, and as you would guess, nothing was there, but I swear I saw it. My dog Frank has had sightings as well. He had refused to eat out of his food bowls that were near the basement door. I moved them to the opposite side where they were. Then he ate out of them again. But my pup still has issues with the basement from time to time. The kitty is still there. It's spooky how my pup will react at times. He stops, looks, and will turn and walk back about 2 times about 2 feet above the ground, his tail between his legs. This shit is real.
That's a really good story. Thank you, Steve, for
Aw.
sending that one
Yeah,
in.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it kind of said it's exactly what you had just said. Like, and this was a couple of years later, so maybe he just didn't notice the cat was there. Maybe the cat's still there.
Maybe I have another cat story, but I don't know if we have time for it tonight. So
I think it's better for another night because maybe
It
we
will
can
be
have
good for
pet
another night.
episode. Yeah,
but that
another
was a
pet
wonderful
episode.
story.
Yeah, I think we'll be having more pet episodes.
Okay, that sounds good.
You
Yeah.
know.
Oh, thank you, Steve. That was wonderful. And thank you, Christina, for reading it. And for everyone, Jen, myself, Christina, thank you for listening to the Hometown Haunts podcast. I am Kat Loco. Along with me, Jen Kohler and Christina Wald. I almost said, and Steve.
He was here in spirit.
He was here in spirit. And as always, you can follow us on our social media. You can find us at Sin Cabinet of Curiosities on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram. And as stated earlier, you can send us your hometown haunts at hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. Good night, everyone, and stay curious.
Bye.
Bye.